You know that classic anxiety nightmare?
Yeah.
The one where you are suddenly just pushed onto a brightly lit stage?
Oh, yeah. And the audience is staring at you in dead silence, right?
Yeah,
Just waiting.
exactly. And you realize with just, like, absolute horror that you don't know a single line of the play.
You're probably not even wearing the right costume either.
Right. It's the ultimate exposure anxiety. The spotlight is glaring, your heart is pounding, and you just know everyone in the room is about to realize that you are a complete and utter fraud.
And usually the advice for that feeling is pretty standard. You take a deep breath, you tell yourself it is just a bad dream, and you wake up.
You reassure yourself that it's all in your head. But, what if you aren't asleep?
Right. What if that stage is your actual workplace, or like your university lecture hall, or the boardroom of your new corporate job?
And what if the reason you don't know the lines isn't because you forgot them, but because the script was written in a language you were intentionally never taught?
That reframing right there sets up our entire mission for this deep dive.
Yes. Today we are taking a feeling that almost everyone listening to this has related to at some point, that nagging, sinking sensation of imposter
And
syndrome.
we're going to look at it through a completely new systemic lens.
Exactly. We're moving entirely past the mainstream self-help books. We aren't going to tell you to, power pose in the mirror or whatever.
Right. Instead, we're looking at the invisible architecture of the rooms we're walking into. And to do that, we are drawing from a really compelling stack of source material today.
So what are we looking at exactly?
We are looking at excerpts from the Paul Grave Handbook of Imposter Syndrome in Higher Education.
Okay, heavy title.
Yeah, it is. Specifically, we're diving into chapters by researchers Maddie Breeze, Michelle Addison, Yvette Taylor, Helen Hewitson, and Faith Tissa.
Nice. And there's also some artwork involved, right?
Yes. We have a deeply personal, visually striking foreword by artist Samia Singh. And finally, we will be analyzing a 2023 academic paper abstract by Nellie Tran that genuinely turns this entire concept completely upside down.
But before we get into all that, to truly understand the friction these authors are describing, we are going to be exploring some fairly intense sociological frameworks today.
Yeah, that is something we need to establish clearly right from the start. The researchers in our source material use some heavy, politically charged frameworks to make their points.
Right.
They are explicitly examining imposter syndrome through the lenses of white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, settler colonialism, and class conflict.
And for you listening, we want to be absolutely clear that our job today isn't to take a side or to endorse these specific political viewpoints.
Exactly. Our mission is to act as impartial guides.
Right. We're just here to break down exactly how these researchers construct their arguments. We are impartially reporting on the ideas contained in the original texts so you can understand why they believe imposter syndrome is a systemic issue rather than a personal one.
So to begin dismantling this idea of imposter syndrome, we actually have to look at what society currently thinks it is.
Right, because the term didn't just appear out of nowhere.
No, it originated back in 1978 in a pivotal paper by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. They were studying high-achieving women at the time.
And they called it the imposter phenomenon.
Right. They did. They defined it as an internal experience of intellectual phoniness. They specifically called it an illusion of personal incompetence.
Wow, an illusion.
Yeah, it's this intense, paralyzing feeling of fraudulence that happens despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
I feel like despite is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that definition.
Oh, totally. The classic assumption is that you have the literal receipts, you have the degrees on your wall, you earn the promotion, you have the outstanding performance reviews.
But your brain is essentially playing a mean trick on you.
Right, and modern corporate culture has really grabbed onto this and sprinted with it. We treat imposter syndrome as a purely individual psychological failing.
Yeah, modern culture frames it as a failure of rationality.
Yeah.
Like the operating logic is that if you just looked objectively at the facts of your own success, you would realize you belong.
Exactly. Therefore, if you still feel like a fraud, you are caught in a mind trap. It's treated as a personal deficiency.
Like a lack of self-esteem that you just need to fix through, I don't know, individualized coping strategies.
Yeah, breathing exercises or whatever. Which is wild. Calling it a failure of rationality feels like telling someone they are completely crazy for shivering when the institution they're standing inside literally has the thermostat set to freezing. That is such a good way to put it.
It just puts all the blame on the individual for reacting completely naturally to a hostile environment.
And that thermostat analogy captures the exact argument made by Maddie Breeze and her co-authors in the Palgrave Handbook.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they argue that hyper-focusing on individual feelings of inadequacy is a massive red herring. It distracts us from the structural reality of the room.
Because the room is cold.
Exactly. Decades of sociological research demonstrate that universities and powerful institutions have historically and actively excluded people based on class, race, and gender.
So if the thermostat really is set to freezing for certain demographics, shivering isn't an irrational mind trap at all. It's an accurate sensory response.
That is the core revelation of the text. For marginalized groups, feeling like an imposter isn't an illusion. The authors point out that it is often a highly accurate interpretation of a discriminatory structure.
Right.
It isn't just the fear of being found out. It is the visceral feeling of already having been found out by a system that was fundamentally not built to accommodate you.
So if the architecture of a space only rewards and recognizes a very specific type of person, feeling out of place means your observational skills are actually working perfectly.
Precisely.
So if imposter syndrome isn't just in our heads, if it's not a personal failure, what is the actual invisible force in the room that's creating this friction?
Well, the sources give us an incredible visual to transition from this high-level structural theory to the actual lived experience of feeling like a fraud.
Oh, you're thinking of the foreword by artist and designer Samia Singh, right?
Yes. She provided the cover art for the Palgrave Handbook, and she captured her own deeply personal experiences of this phenomenon by creating this brilliant visual metaphor. She calls it the lizard person.
The imagery is so evocative. Like in the text, Singh describes this creature as a hybrid, something that inherently feels alien to its environment.
Yeah, sometimes it feels ugly or monstrous or just painfully awkward.
And in her illustrations, you see this lizard person trying to navigate human spaces where everyone else seems to effortlessly glide through.
Right, like that one illustration where the lizard person is standing at the bottom of a grand sweeping staircase feeling incredibly small.
Or the one where the lizard person is staring out at a diving board, fully prepared to jump into the action, but there's a stark sign hanging from the board that just says, "Men only."
Those illustrations perfectly crystallize the tension. It's that feeling of occupying a position where you supposedly belong on paper, like you have the ticket, you are in the building, but you viscerally feel that you are trespassing.
And Singh shares real-world moments that inspired this art, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does. For example, she was invited to Japan for an esteemed program called Door to Asia. She was there representing India as a designer in residence.
Which is a massive objective accomplishment. I mean, that is the literal evidence to the contrary we were just talking about.
Exactly. But she described feeling entirely paralyzed when she got there. She looked around at the slick, polished work of the other international designers, looked at her own background, and felt she had no right to even walk through the door.
Oh, wow. It didn't happen again in Florence, Italy?
It did. She won a scholarship to study printmaking at the legendary Il Bisonte Institute. But instead of feeling triumphant, she walked in, saw Rembrandt's original etchings, and was so overwhelmed by the sheer, crushing legacy of these European Renaissance masters that she couldn't draw for weeks.
That is heartbreaking.
Yeah, she wrote about thinking, what could I possibly see in light and color that the masters haven't already?
That alien sensation Singh describes, that feeling that everyone else knows exactly how to behave, exactly how to create, and inherently knows how to belong, that connects directly to another framework in the sources, doesn't it?
Yes, it connects to a sociological framework introduced in the chapter by Helen Hewitson and Faith Tissa. They utilize Lisa Delpit's concept of the culture of power.
Culture of power. Okay, so is that just an academic way of saying office politics, or is it deeper than that?
Oh, it is much deeper than office politics. The culture of power operates on the premise that the dominant group in any society, which historically in Western higher education and corporate spheres has been white, middle to upper class, establishes a very specific, rigid set of unwritten rules and behaviors.
Like a secret handbook.
Exactly. This culture pervades the environment like oxygen. It quietly dictates what kind of knowledge is considered valuable, what dialect or vocabulary sounds professional, how you should dress, and even how much space you are allowed to take up in a conversation.
Right. Think about the first time you started a new corporate job. You probably spent the first month just trying to figure out the invisible rules.
Oh, for sure.
Like, is this a send a formal email culture or a walk up to my desk and chat culture? Do people actually take their full lunch break? Or is that secretly frowned upon?
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Now imagine that exhausting feeling of trying to decode the room, but applied to your entire existence, your identity, and you're right to be in the building at all.
That is exactly it. And the crucial mechanism of the culture of power is visibility.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you belong to that dominant demographic, you inherently know these rules. You absorb them through your upbringing, your family, your earlier schooling. They are invisible to you because they are tailored to you.
Ah,
But if you come from a marginalized background, these rules are a foreign language. Because you don't inherently know them, you stumble, you hesitate, you inevitably feel like Singh's lizard person, wearing a suit that just doesn't quite fit.
which makes this standard advice for imposter syndrome, which is always some variation of just be more confident or fake it till you make it feel not just unhelpful, but actively misleading.
It really does.
Actually, I want to look at the story of the UK artist and writer Akala from the text, because his experience completely dismantles the idea that confidence is the cure-all.
Yes, the text recounts Akala's experience navigating the UK educational system as a mixed-race student from a working-class background.
He writes about how, in primary school, he was actually incredibly self-confident.
Right, he was a smart kid.
He knew he was smart, and he wasn't doubting his intellect at all. But his teacher was intensely irritated by his self-assertion.
Yeah, the teacher interpreted his natural confidence as a know-it-all attitude.
It was the exact opposite of how that teacher, consciously or unconsciously, believed a working-class, mixed-race pupil should behave in their classroom.
Exactly. And as a result, the teacher actively disciplined him, discouraged him, and eventually had him placed in special needs classes.
Which is just awful. If Akala had the confidence, why was he punished for it?
Because the culture of power doesn't just demand confidence. It demands a very specific performance of confidence that aligns with dominant norms.
Ah, so it has to look a certain way.
Right. Akala's story is a perfect example of the trap. He had robust self-esteem. But the culture of power dictated that his expression of intellect, perhaps his tone, his lack of deference, his working-class vernacular, was unacceptable and threatening. The system marginalized him to correct the deviation.
So telling a marginalized student to just power pose in the mirror and be more confident is practically insulting. The system might actually punish them for demonstrating that confidence if it doesn't look exactly the way the institution expects it to.
Precisely. If the environment is structurally designed to reject you based on race, class, or gender expectations, then individualized confidence is a useless prescription.
Okay, so if Akala's story proves that the room itself is rigged, how does an institution actually fix the room? We can't just hand out self-help pamphlets. What does a systemic intervention actually look like?
This brings us to the fascinating practical research by Hewitson and Tissa. They examined foundation entry programs at a post-92 university in the UK.
Okay, let's translate those terms a bit for a global audience. A foundation entry program is basically a preparatory year before starting an official undergraduate degree, often for students who might not have traditional academic backgrounds.
Right.
And a post-92 university refers to institutions that prioritize widening participation, meaning they accept a much higher proportion of working class, mature, and minority students compared to the older, more elite heritage universities.
Exactly. It's an environment specifically catering to students who might feel like outsiders. The researchers tested a seminar class of 30 of these foundation students using the Clance imposter phenomenon scale.
And what did they find?
The data was stark, though probably unsurprising given what we've discussed. Out of 30 students, 15 scored as having frequent imposter feelings, and 7 scored high.
Wow.
Yeah, only one single student out of 30 scored low.
So half the class is sitting there on day one, waiting for someone to tap them on the shoulder and tell them there's been a clerical error and they need to leave.
Yes, but what is truly groundbreaking is how this specific foundation program addresses that anxiety.
Do they just offer more confidence workshops?
No, not at all. They do not treat the students as deficient. Instead, they use what they call an emancipatory pedagogy to explicitly demystify the unwritten rules of the university habitus.
Wait, university habitus and emancipatory pedagogy? That sounds like something straight out of a dense sociology textbook. What does that actually look like on a random Tuesday morning in a classroom?
That's a fair question. Think of habitus as the deeply ingrained vibes, habits, and invisible expectations of a place.
Okay.
It's the unspoken assumption that you know you shouldn't cite Wikipedia, or that you know it's perfectly acceptable to go to a professor's office hours to ask for an extension.
Right.
If you are a first-generation student, you might think asking for help is a sign of weakness that will get you kicked out.
So emancipatory pedagogy is just like turning the subtext into text.
It is handing them the script, The professors actively teach the students how the culture of power operates in academia.
Oh, wow. They just tell them outright.
Yes, they talk openly about identity, class, and privilege right there in the classroom. They teach meta-learning how to learn alongside the actual academic subject.
Sounds brilliant.
They make every implicit expectation completely explicit, removing the mystery and the intimidation of the dominant culture.
They basically validate the shivering, point at the thermostat, and show the students how the dial works.
That is a great way to summarize it.
And does handing them the script actually change the trajectory of these students?
The results are staggering. By demystifying these rules, the students' self-efficacy soars. The text notes that the foundation students who go through this emancipatory method achieve an 88% graduation rate.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and to put the magnitude of that into perspective, they are significantly beating the national average for all students graduating university, which the text cites as 80%.
That is a life-altering statistic. But I do have a slightly philosophical question about this.
Go for it.
By explicitly teaching these unspoken rules, how to email, how to speak, how to navigate the power dynamics, are we just training marginalized students to perfectly mimic the dominant culture?
I see what you mean.
Like, are we just teaching the lizard person how to tailor a really convincing human suit? Or is this giving them the survival tools they need to eventually get inside the building and change the culture itself?
That is the ultimate tension in inclusive education right there. If you only teach mimicry without context, you're just upholding the existing power structure.
Right, which is just assimilation.
Exactly. You're demanding assimilation, which is exhausting and erases identity. But emancipatory pedagogy is designed to do the latter. It provides the tools for survival alongside the tools for critique.
Well, I like that.
You teach the rules of the game so the student can play it, win the influence, and eventually have the power to rewrite the rulebook entirely.
Which leads us perfectly into our final source. Because if the ultimate goal is to get inside and rewrite the rulebook, then how we label ourselves while we are doing it matters immensely.
This is where we look at the 2023 Academic Abstract by Nellie Tran. Tran takes all of this structural friction, all of this anxiety we have been unpacking, and proposes a radical reframing of the entire experience.
And she bases this on an older framework, right?
She does. She grounds her argument in W.E.B. Du Bois' foundational framework of double consciousness.
Double consciousness is a massive, historically weighty concept.
Mm-hmm.
How does Du Bois define it, and how is Tran applying it here?
Well, Du Bois originally coined the term over a century ago to describe the deep internal conflict experienced by marginalized groups, specifically focusing on the African-American experience in a deeply oppressive society.
Okay.
He described the psychological burden of always looking at oneself through the eyes of a racist dominant culture. You possess your own rich identity and community, but you are constantly forced to measure your worth by the tape of a society that looks upon you with contempt and pity.
You are simultaneously experiencing your own life while being hyper-aware of how the culture of power is judging your every move. It completely splits your identity.
Exactly. And Tran lifts that framework and applies it to modern institutional systems to show how they demand our buy-in.
Buy-in.
Yeah, oppressive systems, whether based on race, gender, or class, require power differentials to survive. They position certain demographics at the bottom, but crucially, they urge the people at the bottom to actively support the structure through internalized oppression.
So rewarding them when they comply and punishing them, like a color when they don't.
Spot on. And this is where Tran looks at the widely accepted term imposter syndrome and says, we need to throw this label in the garbage.
She wants to get rid of it completely.
Yes. She argues that adopting the label imposter is actually playing right into the hands of the oppressive system.
How so?
Calling yourself an imposter assumes that you are a victim desperately waiting for the oppressor's permission to be included. It centers the dominant culture's approval as the ultimate prize.
Wow, yeah.
It assumes your highest goal is simply to be accepted by the very system that marginalized you in the first place.
It concedes that they own the building, and you are just hoping they don't notice you snuck in. So what does Tran propose we call this feeling instead?
Tran renames it the infiltrator experience.
The infiltrator experience. That shift in vocabulary changes everything.
It really does.
Earlier, I compared this to a heist movie, like hacking a mainframe, but honestly, that's not quite right. It's less about anxiously sneaking around hoping you don't trip a laser alarm, and more about intentionally walking into the building as a structural engineer.
Oh, I love that.
You aren't there because you stumbled through the wrong door. You are there intentionally looking for the load-bearing walls you need to knock down so you can widen the doors for everyone else.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. It represents a profound psychological shift from anxiety to agency.
Right.
An infiltrator is highly competent, highly deliberate, and acutely aware of their surroundings. As Tran describes, this moves us away from a traditional multicultural inclusion model.
Where marginalized people are only allowed in when the gatekeepers benevolently open the door.
Exactly. It moves us away from that to a framework where marginalized people enter these systems on purpose. They are there to disrupt, to transform, and to aggressively reclaim space.
It takes all those agonizing feelings of alienation, the shivering, the heavy burden of double consciousness, the awkwardness of the lizard person, and it validates them, but channels them into a clear mission.
Yes.
Of course you feel out of place. You are an undercover agent in a hostile environment. Your discomfort isn't a sign of mental weakness. It is proof that your radar is working flawlessly. You are observing the culture of power and quietly calculating how to dismantle it.
Tran points out that this requires a deliberate decolonizing of the mind. Her framework asks individuals to stop centering the institution's approval and start wondering what true healing and self-reclamation actually look like.
So shifting the internal dialogue.
Right. Instead of asking the anxious question, how can I fix my own flaws so I finally feel like I belong in this boardroom, the infiltrator asks a very different question.
Which is?
What can I do to fundamentally alter this boardroom so that others like me won't have to infiltrate it in the future?
That is powerful. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go about your week? If you have ever felt like an imposter, whether you are sitting in a massive university lecture hall, walking into a high-stakes meeting, or just trying to navigate a new industry, we want you to realize it might not be a personal failure at all.
No, it really might not be.
You do not have a broken brain. You aren't failing at being rational.
You might simply be feeling the very real, highly tangible friction of an institutional architecture that was not historically designed with your success in mind.
And you can choose to internalize that friction. Let it shrink you and read another 10 articles on how to boost your confidence. You can try to be a resilient lizard person with tough skin, just surviving day to day.
Or, better yet, you can choose to fully embrace the infiltrator experience. You can recognize the unwritten rules, learn the script, and use it entirely to your advantage.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over, extending beyond the text we have unpacked today.
Yeah, if we all collectively stopped viewing ourselves as anxious, deficient imposters and started viewing ourselves as highly capable, intentional infiltrators, how would that fundamentally change the way we interact with the people guarding the gates? And more importantly, what is the very first thing you would choose to disrupt once you get inside?
Because at the end of the day, you aren't standing on that stage completely forgetting your lines. You are standing on that stage realizing you're holding a script written for someone else entirely. And as an infiltrator, you have every right to take out a pen, cross out those lines, and write a completely new ending.